Alright, there we go. Mic is up and everything. Alright, cool. Thank you for tuning in, guys. This is the first in a series of streams where we'll be working on the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man costume. I know a lot of people have been asking for that ever since a year ago, around this time, when I did the moving lenses Spider-Man mask. This is this current state of that mask. I've taken the frames and everything out of it for mass production and never assembled it back together, but this is what it looks like now. So basically, to start out this video series, I want to go through everything. I want to go like from step one of doing a print and an entire costume, essentially, in the way that I do it. Here, let me switch to show mode. There we go. So now you can see what's going on the desk a little bit better. What I'm going to be doing for most of this stream is work basically like this. I'm actually going to cut this one apart really fast because I don't like the face shell that I used underneath, the shape of it, very well. So I'm going to go ahead and use a different shaped face shell that is a little bit better suited to the shape of the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe Spider-Man. Well, yeah, we're going to start by actually cutting this one apart to get it off of the mask, because I think it's interesting to start with that step of cutting it apart and making the actual pattern before we start making the official pattern, so that you kind of have in mind like what goes into the whole process and why you do it the way you do it. Thank you guys for tuning in already. It's awesome to just have people stop by immediately once I start these streams. It's cool. It's also cool that this will be archived for later viewing, and you can just watch the entire process of making a print on your own. I will start doing annotated streams where I cut out all the fluff, and like right now this probably wouldn't be in there. We just kind of go straight into working on stuff, but I have to kind of get the video editing software and stuff. I don't have that on my computer. Usually Will tackles that stuff, but I want to be able to edit these things right after I stream them, so you can have a nice little annotated version of the stream, just to get the meat and off of the stream, all the information. So actually, really fast, before we start on cutting anything apart or taping or making our mask or anything, because that's kind of charging just like head first into the project. What we'll actually start with is even before that. Oh yeah, really quick, before we even jump into the MCU stuff, I wanted to really fast. I got Pierce's face shell that we've been watching the construction of out in the mail a few days ago, and so I wanted to kind of work on the 3D printing aspect of face shell, so that the moving Spider-Man face shell will eventually be working on in this thing. I'm almost positive that there's going to be a lot of 3D printing components to it. So it's going to be files that we design on this stream and do like photogrammetry and stuff like that, and all the moving components and everything will be files you can probably buy off of my website for some set amount of money. And then if you've got a 3D printer, or also I started a Shapeways account today. So what Shapeways accounts let you do is once I have this ASM2 face shell actually blown up to the correct size and the mesh and everything cleaned up with my Shapeways account, Shapeways assembles it and ships it to you, and you pay for it on a Shapeways store under my name, and that handles a lot of the problems with manufacturing and how long it takes me to get these things to people. I was looking around on Shapeways earlier today actually, and I found Spidey Planet, I think it is. They do things on Shapeways, and they actually have oh geez, I've been missing all these comments. Gosh, sorry, I don't know why. There we go, come on. I don't know why my stream stopped. Alright, there we go. I always have to have the stream up in front of me, and I don't know if the health is good or not. Anyway, back to Shapeways. So I noticed that there are other people on shapeways that are doing that, are selling face shells, and that handles all of the construction and, you know, mass production basically, and makes everything a lot more available. There we go. All right, now I can see comments. I sometimes, if I can't see comments or my iPad or phone goes off in front of me, I just kind of forget about it. But anyway, that's exciting news with this face shell and the people out there that are waiting to get any of my products. Basically, I'm going to do ASM1, this one, and then make MCU into a 3D printable thing. And yeah, they'll all be available on a Shapeways store basically. And then also I'll just sell the STL files probably cheaper than they would be on the Shapeways store, so that you really can just buy the files and do it yourself. Okay, so I think that's pretty good for referencing this neat little photogrammetry projects. That was actually a few streams back. So if you're curious about photogrammetry or how I got this scan of basically this face shell right here, a perfect 3D scan in my computer, and then this was 3D printed. If you're curious about how I did that, I covered that in a couple of my older streams. Anyway, okay, so back to Marvel, starting out the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, just to kind of get that out there. That's what MCU means is Marvel Cinematic Universe. To start on this suit, you always want to start with reference photos. Reference photos are going to be the most important thing always. So pretty much I show you my computer here, and I'll talk a little bit about the other suits I've designed. Here is Amazing Spider-Man 1 with Andrew Garfield, and this is just my collection of reference photos of that suit. And this is always where you want to start. A lot of these photos I think are sometimes after the fact, after the movie has come out, because sometimes, like right now, the Marvel movie isn't coming out for several months, so there are a lot of promo photos and images from trailers, but there's not as much you know, image-wise available as there is after the movie. And sometimes that's why it's not really worth it to start the costume before the movie. It's kind of just a race mentality some people have. I admit I've definitely gotten caught up in that before, that it's like, first to get this suit done. But the quality suffers because you're starting before there's reference images, and then after the movie comes out, there's way more reference available, so you don't, you know, it's easier. It's just generally easier. And so, you know, a lot of these are from after that, but this is a spy shot back from when I was starting out the suit. And like, you know, these spy shots are actually pretty valuable, because if you look at this, it shows, there's a seam that goes underneath his armpit, it goes up along his arm, and it meets down here. Yep, looks like he's got the same, he has an invisible zipper, the exact same way that the Raimi suits have. You can tell that seam is just thicker, and you know, it stops right about here, it looks like, that invisible zipper. And then, you know, you can see how the pattern is going, all the muscle shading. This one is just like straight daylight or really bright lights. That actually might just be really bright lights at night, because I think this was a night scene. But you can see the muscle shading on the suit really well on this. So that was part of how I, you know, designed this print, you know, is reference images like this that give you just a lot of information. And then you've got promo shots like this that sometimes promo shots like this are the only ways you're getting information on, like, the boots. Boots can be really difficult. Shoes and boots can be hard to get good reference on, and different angles on the gloves can sometimes be hard to find reference on. But you need to just find a lot of pictures. Like, there was another one that gives you reference of the boot. That was a cool reference one. Okay, so that was just ASM1, the kind of stuff I had. And then here's ASM2. This is actually a couple of reference shots of lenses that I put together in Photoshop, or you could do it in Paint too. But it's nice that this is when I was working on this face shell, right, I've got sitting here in front of me. And it's just nice that I had all of these different angles, and, you know, this one's a promo image, and this one is a spy shot on the set. This one's promo, this one's promo. So it just has a lot of different angles and information to work off of. And then otherwise, here's a spy shot that was from early on. Luckily with Amazing Spider-Man 2, when that came out in 2014, like summer of 2013, so like half a year, no, like a full year before this movie even came out, a whole bunch of spy shots were released from the set of the movie. I think that was one. Just these really high quality. I don't know if they maybe just released them themselves or they got leaked, but these photos were so invaluable to figuring out like, oh well, it looks like maybe this is where the pattern breaks. That was hard to figure out, but it turns out that that's where that pattern breaks because the seam lines up with it right here. But that's the kind of reference photo you need, especially like working on the mask here. His head is basically directly from the side here. So it was just pretty simple to just kind of use a reference image like that and create from that. Use that information to just debug the pattern that they make, essentially. Yeah, so essentially that's kind of the gist of reference photos. And I'm just kind of going through my ASM2. Like, this was a promo shot, I think, and once again, it just has the mask perfectly from the side. That was just kind of like, sometimes production companies make it easy on you when you're designing a suit like this. Like, I remember when The Dark Knight came out, the Batman suit, where it kind of turned, it was the second Christopher Nolan Batman movie, so the suit was really cool and tactical, and I definitely wanted to do that suit. I made it out of latex and, simple stuff when that movie came out, and there was a promo image of The Dark Knight of Christian Bale. I think it was actually like a Got Milk ad or something, and he was just standing in his suit, just perfectly square to the camera. It was so clear that you could scale it and then pick it apart. It was amazing that they did that. So sometimes they're nice and they do that. They take just perfect from the side images that when you overlay it with your pattern in reality, it gives you a lot of information on what you need to do. More spy shots. Yeah, you just need to basically start a folder in whatever images folder you have on your computer and label that. Well, I have a hierarchy of folders. I'll do the whole project under like Amazing Spider-Man 2, ASM2, and then inside the ASM2 folder I'll have ASM2 reference images, and then also inside the ASM2 folder I'll have ASM2 pattern files for the Photoshop files that you make. And you just kind of, that keeps everything nice and orderly. So you just to begin with, switch over to MCU now. When you're starting with a new one like MCU, I actually don't have a ton of reference photos. I haven't done a ton of digging, but I found a couple that have a lot of really good information. Like this one has a lot of just really valuable information on where a potential seam can be. I think this one was from the movie, the Avengers movie last year, so it's actually not totally up to date with Homecoming, but I think that the suit is pretty similar. I'm not totally sure, but I have a couple of other reference photos, not a ton. That one is good because it's a GIF and he actually moves his head. Yeah, I don't really have a ton. I think I have them on my laptop actually, because my laptop is a little bit more mobile for working on projects like this. But I do, and I have them on my iPad in front of me here too. But I think these are what I collected last year when I was starting the project for the moving lenses. Anyway, back to show mode, because basically you just need to go to Google and Google image search, Spider-Man, Homecoming, costume, all of that. And then I just have my reference images in front of me here. I'll try to show them when I reference them on the camera. So to start with here, I want to take this mask off because this is an attempt I made at making the pattern a few weeks ago, and it's okay. There are a couple things that are wonky about it. I think this chin gap is too big, but I realized I made a special shell that has no lens opening on it, but after looking at a bunch of reference photos and referencing it a lot, I think that he has more of a bulge, eye and temple area, and I think that's a lot like the Amazing Spider-Man 1 mask. It's just a lot more bugged out around the eyes, and that's actually not like super natural or normal. It actually, when you kind of look at it for a while, it looks sort of you know, just alien. It looks like Spider-Man has an alien head, but you know, that's kind of just the design of it. So I realized that this one is not quite right for designing that. I do here, if you can see, I've got this lens outline. This lens outline is actually a remnant from this moving lenses mask project I did from last year. Because this lens outline is obviously pretty important to the design of the mask, and pretty key to the moving lenses aspect too. So I think I got a pretty good shape out of it here, and just moved it forward. I think there's a little bit of tweaking that needs to be done to the size and shape, but it's good when you're at that point, when you have an outline and you can step back and be like, well, maybe this bottom, you know, this bottom bulge at the bottom, basically bottommost point of the frame, could just go down a little bit more. The whole shape of it could be stretched down a little bit, and that's really a good place to be, because then you can do that. And this lens template is just printed on printer paper out of my printer, and then I just spray a little bit of spray adhesive on it, just a can of spray adhesive. You can get that at most hardware stores or any stores really, and then put it on manila envelopes, like those folders that you put files and stuff in, and then you cut it out, and you're left with a really nice thicker, you know, paper wouldn't be this durable and thick, and it's easier to, you know, if you're using it as a template, if you're putting it on material and tracing it. I think I've traced this a couple times and it stands up to that pretty well. So manila folders are, you know, nice, an easy solution to that. You just spray your outline on there. Oh, I probably should have marked that. I have it marked a little bit, but you know, I'll get my Sharpie out. Basically, I'll just do a quick outline of, looks like the point of the upper lens up here passes up and above this webbing line right here. So you just gotta kind of pay attention to those little key markers. And it looks like the point in his eye is not actually centered on that gap he's got. He's got a really big web gap in the center here, bigger than it's ever been in movies, I think, before. You know, the Amazing Spider-Man movies had a tiny little web gap in the eyes, but now they've just made it huge. But you might think that the corner of the lens would want to, you know, sync up to the middle of that. It looks like from the reference photos that I've got, this is what I'm looking at. I wonder if that'll work and you'll be able to see it. This is another set shot from the actual Homecoming movie. Yeah, you can kind of see that. That's a spy shot, or maybe not a spy shot, but it's a shot from the actual set. And so it's from 3/4 angle, and it has a lot of information because of that for processes like this. Yeah, all right. So I'm marking this line, I'm tracing this outline because what I have here, I haven't really explained it very much, but what I have here is just masking tape on top of tin foil, on top of a face shell, on top of a mannequin head. If you don't have a mannequin head like this one, it's just a plastic mannequin head, and they cost about $20 plus whatever shipping for, you know, the larger sized item. But I've had this mannequin head for probably like a decade and used it for a ton of projects. And they're really valuable for things like this. All right, I'm just getting the general outline on here. It's not too important because I'm going to be redoing this kind of overall design in a second here. Okay, so I've had this mannequin head for a long time, so I don't really care too much about it. What I do just for time's sake is I just take an X-Acto knife or any type of knife, and you know, you just go through all the different layers. Not any type of knife, any type of utility blade. For the sake of this pattern, I've really started to dislike having the seam up here that comes into the corner of the lens up here. I've got it up here too. Actually, my seam stops about a centimeter short of the lens. Maybe that's what I'll do again. But anyway, I've done that before where the seam comes right up and into the lens area, and it just gets really difficult to manage the lens when it's fighting against a seam that bunches up and comes in right there. And that's actually the design from the movie. You know, it looks like that's what this one does a little bit. I think I've seen other people that have worked on the pattern make it in that way. It's hard. It butts up against it and fights it. So maybe I will try to get it a little distance away so it's flatter, because there is. It's difficult to show you from my iPad, but it looks like there is a webbing segment right behind his eye, and maybe I'll try to stop that seam. Yeah, it's right above my thumb there. Maybe I'll try to stop that seam like right at that webbing segment behind his eye. So I'm pretty pleased with the work I did on these webbing lines going back here on this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and trim. I think I'll trim under this line I've made here. You never want to cut towards yourself. I'm kind of in a unique position because I'm trying to cut in such a way that you can see it. But basically, never cut towards yourself in such a way that if you lose control, the blade comes off and stabs you or slices your finger. Just always have control over the direction, and if anything goes wrong, make sure you're not behind the blade. Okay, just moving along here. That's the back of the face shell, so it just kind of fell off a little bit. Pretty sure I'm going to need to score that a little bit more probably, because it doesn't have to be perfect. All we need is an approximation right now of the size of everything and where all the spacing and everything goes. Alright, so I'll lay it down right here so I have a little more control. Again, I don't want to get my body behind the knife. As long as your body's not behind the knife, you can kind of, I don't want to say be careless, but I mean, you just don't have to, you know, you can be quick with your cuts, because there's nothing really that can go wrong. Alright, I probably have to score that a little bit, because I've got tin foil underneath. You can probably see that a little bit here around the edges, the shininess of the tin foil. The masking tape is covering tin foil around the mannequin head, so I've just made that cut, and now another thing I need to decide on, and this is basically where the pattern making of this comes into play. You know, it was a lot more obvious on Amazing Spider-Man costumes, because they had a pretty consistent technique in those movies of how they sewed together their pattern pieces and stuff. It was kind of easy just to see from high detailed shots how they did their seams. This one's a little more complicated, at least on the mask, because I know that they probably screen printed this raised material, and in the pattern that they did it in, and with that little gap that it's got between the raised details inside of the webbing, that's actually a pretty effective place to hide your webs. So I'm basically just deciding, you know, if this was a standard Amazing Spider-Man pattern, the seams were always kind of like tusks, like sort of like a tusk seam that goes down from your nose and down your chin and all the way down to the bottom of the mask. And that was just because there were webbing segments, and there are still webbing segments here for that. So that might still be a viable solution. Yeah, you know what I could do is I could probably start the seam even lower so that the seam isn't ugly. The only problem is if you start a dart halfway through a material, like if I were to start this forehead dart and start it right here, if you don't do the dart, finish the dart really well, sometimes you get a little point. I see a lot of printmakers that don't understand the seam that happens on the Raimi pattern, this V seam right here. The Raimi pattern, they were able to get away with that gap in the neck and in the chest because the end of that dart was covered by the chest spider on the Raimi pattern. So a lot of those patterns you'll see, there's a little point, like a little pokey out spot. A lot of pattern makers that, because if you have a material that has a dart that does this, that if your dart comes together at any angle other than pretty parallel and flat, like comes together kind of smooth, then it's going to turn into a point. Once everything is folded together, it comes together as a point and a pointed out spot. And they were able to get away with that with the Raimi pattern because the chest spider was glued on top, and the urethane webs were glued on top of that little pointed spot, so it wasn't such a big deal. But I see that pattern constantly used, and it's just kind of like a dead giveaway of someone who doesn't really understand pattern construction, designing patterns. And yet those people magically have perfect patterns to Amazing Spider-Man 2 somehow, and then go back to having Raimi patterns again. Really crazy. Basically, for the sake of this, I think I'm going to try what I had mentioned before and do a gap here, but not an entirely separate piece that goes all the way up to the face. And actually, you know, I could even go even a little lower here, and then that would really make it not noticeable. Yeah, I'll do that, because that's even less noticeable. Hopefully that cut I just made won't be too big of an issue. I don't think it'll come apart too badly. Okay, so what I'm doing on this one, the last one I stayed on one side of the duct tape, and you know, I'll definitely get into this once I create the mask pattern again. I'm kind of skipping ahead a lot here to get to taking this pattern I've got on here off. But what I've done to get these black lines all over, you might be wondering, like, well, what are those black lines on there? This is just duct tape. This is black duct tape. You could use regular duct tape if you want to. But what I do is just take black duct tape, and you can rip it really easily. Duct tape is designed to be ripped. And what I do is I grab just as much as like the thickness I want. I like this kind of 1/4 inch thickness, because that kind of seems to be how thick, maybe a little thinner than that, but how thick overall the structure of the webbing is, with the gap and the webbing included. So I think that's a good thickness to go for, and it's kind of as thin as you can tear duct tape anyway. So you just grab the duct tape with just a 1/4 inch from the edge in your little pinch here, and you rip. And what I'm left here with is just a perfect little 1/4 inch strip of duct tape, or whatever length you've put down there. And that lets you take that duct tape and say I'm starting another webbing line on this side. You figure out where you want to start it, and you're given a lot of freedom here now, because it's just duct tape and it's on top of masking tape, so it's the easiest thing to separate from one another. So now I'm able to kind of pull backwards in the direction that the web goes and stretch as I go, and I can kind of pull and make a curve by, as it, you know, lays onto the material, I kind of gradually, incrementally move it in a direction. So once again, it's just kind of like, if you look at people who do like a lot of airbrushing and masking with airbrushing, that's what they do a lot of with there. So you can see I'm starting out pulling in the direction that I want the webbing to start going, and then as I kind of lay it onto the mask, I can change the direction it's going, and you know, that allows me to get pretty complex curves. You know, I was able to just get a pretty overarching curve out of that. And this is advice for whatever custom pattern you're making. If you're making any kind of custom pattern, you basically start with what I had just mentioned, the reference photo stage. You know, you just have to have a lot of information to go off of, things to look at and judge how it's supposed to be. And so going back to separating the pattern, since it's I've got that duct tape, it's just quarter inch duct tape, and I've got my X-Acto knife here. I'm just kind of going from the middle of that duct tape and trying to stay on the middle, and cutting along. And remember, you're going to have to kind of score it probably. You're going to have to go along a couple times. And this is a little tricky because this is you know, a really complex curve here, and so there's a high chance that I'm gonna, you know, my blade might slip and, you know, injure myself. So you want to be careful, and just be careful. You know, just don't be too willy-nilly with it and hurt yourself. So yeah, that's pretty well scored. See, yeah, this is a kind of difficult cut to get at in here. I'm actually going to start from the other end and meet it at that middle. I don't have a ton of information on the neck. You know, if any of you out there are watching and you have a pretty well stocked reference image library of images of the MCU suit that you're going off of, if you want to email those to me, or maybe send me a link to a page that has that, that'd be really great, because I've been looking around for reference photos, but I know that there are some out there that you guys managed to find that are pretty crazy. And you know, the more reference I have for this sake of this stream, the more I can, you know, really try to, you know, I'm going to really try to get this as accurate as possible, like I usually try to do, and do that in front of you guys, so that, you know, you can come back and watch this entire stream and learn how to do the process of making this thing. And once again, this is basically the intro to pattern making right here. That's why, you know, I'm starting with taking off this pattern, just so you see that what we're doing here, what the overall point is at the end of it, of this taping process. Okay, so I have a choice here. I could do the forehead seam again, like they typically do, or they did for the last ASM 1 and 2 movies. But that's really tough. It's a tough thing to do well, to not make it, you know, wobbly or to cover it up convincingly. And also, I can tell with this pattern that this is high. This is pretty high up. This side seam that we've got here, it's pretty high up. When you're cutting these seams, you know, a lot of people, when you kind of first are introduced to spandex, you think about it and you're like, well, why can't you just have the mask be sewn together with one seam that goes all the way up the side, and so it's just one in the front and one in the back? Well, that doesn't control the stress on the fabric very well, I guess is the best way to explain it. If you were to do that, just one seam, and it's basically a outline of the mask, and then it stretches on. That's basically like what simple like ski masks are like. It stretches a lot more in the front and doesn't stretch very much on the sides. And so that's not, for like a high quality thing, that's not the kind of what you want to go for with these you know, pattern pieces. So what you do, the point of that is that, you know, we're cutting these seams because they relieve that stress. They make the stress even. But because it is spandex, like, I could do without this forehead seam. It's going to have to stretch a lot in here, but that's possible. Spandex can do that. It can do that amount of stretch and still get away with it. And then it would be a nice smooth finish and not really have a forehead seam. So I think that I might try, at least here, to omit the forehead seam in my pattern. And then I'll probably have it go up either to the very top of the mask or the webbing segment behind that, and then in the back it will have a middle seam, because it's just kind of important on the back that you have a middle seam. You don't have to, but it just kind of, for construction's sake, makes a little more sense. And that's kind of what the Raimi pattern did. The Raimi pattern had a solid forehead piece that joined with 2 back pieces. So I'll go ahead and I've already cut that loop over the side here. I don't have my webs to kind of demonstrate where that seam is going to need to be, but I can kind of guesstimate it. And it doesn't matter too much, because this isn't, I don't think, the mask pattern that I'm going to go with at the end of everything. This is just kind of, it'll be good reference, because I spent about an hour and a half working on this one several weeks ago. You've probably seen it in some of my earlier photos on the website. And I knew I wanted to do this stream and this kind of tutorial type thing. I'm sick of working on this stuff kind of in secret. It just doesn't really make sense to me anymore to do that. So what I'm doing here is I found that back seam where the forehead piece will kind of meet with those two back pieces. It's a little awkward for me because I'm trying to make this visible to everyone, to all of you. I think that's probably a little bit better, a little safer too. So I'm starting at that cut I made initially, and I'm just going along here. We did a sewing tutorial on Tuesday, kind of just an intro to basic sewing stuff on my stream on Tuesday, and that's actually pretty valuable to watch too for this, because that's, it's important to know what kind of seams you can do, what's possible as far as sewing together seams. And I talked about a couple different seams on the pattern. So I'm going straight across. I didn't mark the web shapes. There's a very subtle web shape, it looks like, on these pieces. Whoops, the blade came out. There's a very subtle web shape on these pieces, and that's kind of the way most Spider-Man suits have been. And there's a technique to making the web shaped seam. I'm gonna definitely get into that. I think that's kind of its own lesson. But you can make your seams shaped like that web if you pin them properly. It's just kind of a little more laborious, but it makes for a really cool effect. Okay, and so just cutting along here. Now, I don't have the lines on the other side here. I only work on one side usually. The reason for that is, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm going to transfer it over to the computer, I'm going to digitize it, and then use that and flip it over. Usually whenever you're doing pattern work, I only ever design half of a pattern and then flip it over. I have, on some patterns, designed 2 textures per each pattern, so that when it's flipped over, the texture isn't totally mirrored. Because you want the details, all the bigger, like the web lines and the shape of it, to be all perfectly mirrored. But if the texture, like like with ASM1, there's a very pixely texture to it. If that's totally mirrored, that might be something people look at and say, that, I can see that it was just flipped over and mirrored. So I actually made 2 separate textures on those pieces, so that once it was flipped over, I could change the texture and it would look like a totally fully done piece. But we'll get more into that once print design comes up. So right now, okay, back to the point of that. So there's nothing over here, but because I have my middle line, that's what this web line up here denotes, that's my middle line, so I don't really have to, as long as I have that and all of the information on one side, I really don't have to worry too much about this other side. It's all going to be flipped over. I even would probably want to mark the middle on this nose, say with like a Sharpie. I'm actually going to do that because in the next step of getting it over to the computer, alright, so I just found the middle there, kind of nice middle point. Now I'm sitting here wondering if I even should start from scratch on it, because this thing actually, I spent a fair amount of time working on getting the pattern kind of cohesive, and even if it's not perfect, once you've got a pattern that you've started out with and it has the general shape of the pattern that you're going for, you can start making test masks. You can make a test mask with your pattern and then sew it together, and if it looks weird, if some part looks weird, just go back to your file and edit it a little bit and get it to the point where it doesn't look weird and you can use it. It probably makes more sense to just go ahead and really fast continue on finishing off this design, because I've almost actually done it. Just so that I have this available. So as you can see, I've already done my side web lines. That's kind of key, because the head of a Spider-Man mask, they always kind of have to do some weird stuff to fit in the nice web shape at the face that then condenses and bottlenecks to a uniform webbing pattern all the way around the neck. And I think I got that pretty well. You want a nice uniform spacing between all your webbing segments starting at the neck. That's kind of a good base point. And then you want to also start on the other end with your face point, knowing where your lens shape is. If you don't have a lens template like I did, basically you're going to start with a reference image like this one I've got right in front of me here of that Spider-Man, and this other side is a pretty good example. I would just kind of use that reference image to very loosely just kind of sketch based on the information. I've worked a lot with this lens already last year, so I mean it kind of the shape already gets kind of burned into my brain and makes sense to me. Yeah, this is nice because I actually get to kind of make it a little bigger for the other reference of the other side, because this actually is something I'll have reference of when I do it. And so you can see I just did that really sketchily, if you get close to it, you'll see that there are a lot of lines that go off of the shape, and it's a really loose, rough type thing. It wasn't perfect right away. You just keep kind of sketching over it and going over your lines, and you're left with kind of a solid shape. Like when you back up, you can see it's kind of a solid shape that matches on the other side. It might be a little too big. I might be a little too used to the Amazing Spider-Man series of masks, but I've got a pretty good template going on the other side. All right, so like I was saying, you've got these webbing segments that you've started out with, going from the front of the mask down towards the neck, and the next bit of work to do, I just did this segment basically, is to start kind of from the top and center and start kind of spiraling outward of the mask. I can tell that one wasn't quite over far enough, so a little more like that probably. Maybe, yeah, a little more like that. So this is basically entirely what this process is. It's just duct tape over the masking tape and foil and everything, and I'm just kind of moving things around constantly and finding the best, nice, orderly, you've made a pretty good pattern when all of the squares are very similar size to the squares surrounding it. A rough, kind of messy pattern, you'll see there will be a really thin square and then a really fat, thick square next to it. Usually, no, it's always a really, a good pattern has just, nice, consistent sizes to these grid shapes. Spider-Man suits with these grid shapes are essentially like mesh, 3D pattern meshes. They have their own grid to them in such a way that you could really make a 3D file just from the webbing on a Spider-Man mask, potentially. Okay, so you can tell that the webbing gets closer in here. It starts spaced out on the top of the mask, and as it comes down, it starts to curve in and get closer here. And once again, it might not be perfect, but all you do is you just keep putting this tape on where you know that there's a webbing line, because you know it has to be there, and then you put on this webbing segment, and you can tear longer pieces of duct tape so that you have longer strips to work with. I just tore a little example piece, and now I'm working with shorter strips here. Okay, so it looks like this one comes down pretty close to the circle that goes around the lenses, but then comes in and hits the top of the chin. Yeah, I think like that. That's a pretty, symmetrical. It's just, all the sizes are very pleasant. It's like a smooth shape that comes down and along and all over. And sometimes what will happen is you'll put a piece like this down, and it looks really good, but the one that you put on before now, oh, that one looks like it's off a little bit. Its spacing is off. I don't think that's actually the case, but if anything, I need to actually curve this out a little bit more. I think it made a little bit too straight of a dart out to that shape. Alright, so that's a little better. It still is, you don't want like corners essentially. Your webbing should curve and be nice, nice and smooth shaped. Never anything that really is like a harsh corner. So that's pretty good. Wish I could put a picture of the mask up behind me so that you could compare it to what I'm building currently. Oh, there we go. Oh, my chat's been off. Oh well. Sorry, I haven't been looking at chat really. Once again, Will is out on work today, so I'm alone here running the stream. But it's just exciting that I'm able to do that. Just run the stream here. Nice if I could see the chat though. Huh. Oh, that's funny. I just read David's comment that the streams are too late for him. Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to happen to someone. And it seems like most of my viewers are in the US and Canada, so. Okay. So, continuing on, I think I've got that web line pretty well down. Don't really have a side of the head shot right here. I'll look at my my desktop view here again. You can look through my sparse reference photos here for something on the side of the mask. Alright, what do I have here? See, I've gathered a couple of reference photos here. I think that's the one I was looking at on my iPad. Okay, I can kind of see it down here. So that's the webbing. This is the webbing line I just put down. This one right here. This one was already on the mask. And so basically it looks like you've got this one right here. Yeah, that's the one that I've chosen to have as my seam for the back pieces. So oh wow, you can see on this photo I've bumped the contrast. You can see their seam. Look at this. You can actually see their seam just running straight through the material. They didn't even attempt to hide it on this one. I'm wondering if there wasn't a lot of visual effects stuff that went at least into the mask, because you know that they're still doing their computer generated moving lenses, so I think that they kind of, yeah, they just used a seam like that, or a pattern like that. That's pretty interesting. I don't plan on following that. That's interesting. So now I wonder if I have anything that is a little more information on that side of the mask. Yeah, I think that might be it. Yeah, that kind of helps a lot, because you can see there's a little joined webbing segment here. That happens because, once again, the head of the mask is so large. It's difficult to have all these different webbing segments that come down and meet up. So let me get another tape piece right here. Alright. Well, I think it's kind of fun when you can kind of tell how they make they solve some issues for the movie pattern, but when you're at the point where it's kind of like, well, I don't think that's how I want to do it. I want to do it a different way. And most of the time in my experience, when you decide to do that, when you decide, okay, they did it their way, but I'm going to try and do it my own. Like with this one, you can see the seam here, because I think this is a photo I kind of bumped up the saturation on. You can see the seam right here, and then you can see the seam going back. That is essentially just the Amazing Spider-Man mask pattern, because I think it is the same. I think that is the same pattern, and I think the same company as those Amazing Spider-Man movies. So let's see here. How's this one go? So yeah, that one went right down to like just below the chin. I kind of went on the chin, but it looks like it actually goes just below the chin. And then this one, wow, this one butts right up against it. It comes like, you know, half the distance of this one. This is actually an example kind of what I was talking about with sloppy pattern making. You don't really want to do a lot of this. You don't want these two squares are about 1 inch long each, and then this one's 1/2 inch long. It's not very noticeable because it's under the chin, so I can understand why they made that choice. But at the same time, it's just kind of not something that most of the other suits have ever had to deal with. Okay, so now that I've got that kind of in mind here, let me switch back to show mode. I should put that little reference photo up like behind me right here over where my body is. Maybe I'll take a break here in a minute and I'll get that going, because that's not too difficult of a thing to do. So basically, like we just saw on that reference photo, it comes down and, ooh, that's nice because that's where my face shells usually end. That line right there. So that's web seam will actually hide the edge of the face shell. That might be why they did it. Who knows? That's kind of the fun of it. It's like, maybe that's why they did that. You know, because it does kind of seem like a bizarre place to put a webbing segment, but at the same time, that's like the perfect bottom profile shape of a chin. So, and of a face shell, like where a face shell might kind of separate. So who knows? That could be the reason for that. Because that's always been something that you see on my shells is a little bit, especially if you have a smaller head, is you see that kind of harsh line of the bottom of the face shell. Just because of the nature of vacuforming, it's hard to get kind of curved under shapes. You kind of have to have downward shapes. Okay, so let's go back to that reference photo really quick that I was just looking at. Oops, that's all right. Oh yeah, that's the wrong screen. Okie dokie. So looks like the next webbing is actually a part of that last webbing segment I did, and it just, you know, goes off on its own there and kind of flattens out and starts the webbing segments that are going to go down the back of the mask here. So once again, just a simple little rip. Got my 1/4 inch little piece of duct tape from that. I mean, you may struggle with that a lot. You may mangle a lot of pieces of duct tape until you get the swing of tearing duct tape like that. But once you do get it, you'll be able to do it pretty effectively. Okay, so what we were just looking at was a seam that comes up. I need to look at it again because I'm not positive which segment it butts up with. Yep, I'm glad I looked at it because it's not this one where the seam ends, but it's actually the next one down. So I'm going to go ahead and use that as my point for that. Alright, cool. So back to show mode. So yeah, so this is where I have my seam stopping, but I think this is actually the start of that webbing segment. One down there. Alright, so that basically starts the back webs, it looks like. I'll get it more flat on here. So keep in mind this point here, that's what we're looking at here, and I'll go back to the reference photo here. So yeah, and we want it to kind of be going up. It's not really like flat, it kind of goes up a little bit. It doesn't really flatten out too much. Oh, whoops, wrong screen again. And then, you know, I think this next one that starts below it is the first like neck web line. So I'll go ahead and make sure that that one is going kind of, I think it might be going a little too high. So just peel it back a little bit and try again. Okay, so yeah, it's looking pretty good and symmetrical already. So next up is that neckline. So once again, 1/4 inch, you'll just get the feel of it after a while. Duct tape is designed to be easy to tear. It's just a really easy vinyl material with a structure underneath it for that. One thing you might be able to see here, my duct tape is kind of peeling up a little bit. That's because I haven't messed with this very much in the last several weeks. I think I did this 3 weeks ago, and then I'm still owing a bunch of people face shells and stuff. So I'm trying to work on these projects every now and then, but still get progress done. I just got Pierce's shell out in the mail, so I thought it was finally time to kind of dive into this. Anyway, if you leave these duct tape lines on a mask for a long time, they'll kind of start to peel up, especially if they're having to hold kind of complex curves, because they have to strain. You know, the strip of duct tape is kind of straining itself. All right, let me look at the reference photo again really fast. Just always look at your reference photos. When in doubt, reference photos. Okay, wrong screen again. I'm gonna do that 10 more times today. So we just did this web segment here, this gap that is kind of this triangle. So now we're starting on this next gap. And as you can see, it's about the same length on the back of the head between those. So what I had just started to do on the mask here, I think I was a little too close. So you really want to account for that length in your, I think that's still even a little too close. Sometimes you have really large web segments on these suits that kind of are weird, but at the same time it's because, you know, the side of that, the profile of the side of the head, you know, up around here is the largest it gets. It's like a balloon that gets blown up in order to house the head. So just using my tape again here, and I've already cut that seam, but I'm actually kind of taping over it to hold it in place while I finish doing this webbing process here. Okay, so it looks like probably something like that, I bet. Then that starts the neck webbing lines. Basically, every webbing line now down from there is just kind of the beginning of the upper torso here. You know, you have all of the web segmentations, and then you're kind of starting that grid down to the rest of the body. You could conceivably definitely have this, oh, wrong side. You could definitely have this line be a removable mask. Maybe it's a little too high. You kind of want it to be down here, but invisible seamed removable mask. You know, you want the bottom of the mask to be really high up on your neck, and then you have a hood underneath that keeps your neck stretched up, you know, pretty tight. And so, yeah, hold on, just kind of editing this curve here. I like pulling up those reference images on my computer because then you guys get to see what I'm looking at specifically, and then that means I get to pull up comments on my iPad here, and that's a lot easier for me to see those rather than having to look at my screen that's about 20 feet away from me right now. Sorry, let me pull this up. Here we go. All right. So I'm kind of fixing the shape of a curve here. It was kind of at just a wonky shape just because of the way I applied it. But that's kind of the name of the game, is just always going around and fixing those tape lines and making it, I used to always do this with Sharpie. I haven't done tape lines like this until pretty recently. I used to just do it with pencil and Sharpie and stuff, and that was the way I always did it. Okay, awesome. There we go. Didn't want to show me chat. Awesome, there we go. Now I've got chat in front of me. Hey guys, a lot of haze from you guys. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go ahead and keep moving down here. I should bring up just a view of this screen. Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna take a quick break, like a minute here, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring up that reference, that screen I keep going back and forth between. I'm gonna just bring that up so that's sitting right behind me, so that whenever I'm talking about whatever reference image I'm looking at, we have that behind me to look at. So I will be right back in about a minute while I get a glass of water too. So be right back. Okay, I'm back. Now you can see I've got the reference photo up here behind me, so that will be a lot easier, I think, to kind of, constantly reference, so you know what I'm looking at while we're building this thing. Okay, so I don't know if this image is super useful from this point onward. There's a little bit of information to be gleaned, I'd say, from like right here. It's a little hard for you. It's not the most clear image, but I'd say that's the webbing line we just put down right there. And then there's another one right here, and then another one under, oh wait, right here. Yeah, looks like there's two more. Kind of starts to get closer and closer. But at that point, it's like, why beat yourself up? There's probably another reference image out there that has got that kind of information. This one's good for the back of the head. Looks like they did a zipper, an invisible zipper on the back of the mask again, which sucks, because those aren't great. I liked the fact that they didn't have any zippers or anything on the Sam Raimi suits. They just didn't need them. Hey, I just saw Joshua's comment. That's funny. Yep, we're live, Joshua. Thanks everyone for tuning in and checking everything out. It's kind of a fun learning experience getting into all this stuff. But I really enjoy it because it's more fun than just kind of sitting alone and working on this stuff. And I've got a lot of other projects I want to work on, so it's a good excuse to kind of work on that stuff. All right, let's see. What do I have here? A little teaser there. So this is a CG thing I think was posted on the RPF. This is actually pretty good. Someone did a pretty good job of getting a lot of those details. I think this was just from Civil War. But the details seem like they're for the most part the same. I think it's kind of in the story the same suit, but maybe with a couple of slight changes to it. But that helps a lot for the sake of the mask, the neck. It's not it's not too difficult. It just has to be consistent. It looks like we've got three chunks, three grid chunks, three columns, or rows. Sorry, these are rows. Vertical is columns, horizontal is rows. So we've got three more rows to go, webbing rows, before we reach the bottom of the mask, like right around here. And it looks like Once again, this is a CG thing I think someone did. I don't know what this is from. I don't think it's necessary. I'm not sure if it's official or not, but it looks like this bottom webbing mask kind of is like where your shirt neckline is. You know, where the neck kind of starts to really expand outward into the torso. You know, where that kind of bottleneck is, and that's usually the case on Spider-Man costumes. There's usually a webbing seam, like right where the neck turns into the torso, and vice versa. So I'm actually going to start with that one. That'll help with spacing out these remaining webbing segments I have to do. So what I do is I, kind of get that bottom webbing segment, I'm talking about this one right here, that starts the base of the neck. Because then you look down here, and I'm not sure if this is accurate or not, I'm pretty sure it is, but those, like I said, it's a bottleneck right here. As soon as it starts to go down, it starts to double the webbing segments, because once again, the webbing has to compress into a really tight bottleneck shape. That's the really difficult thing, I think, about designing these Spider-Man costumes, is how to make that happen and not have to just follow the same thing every time. So I'm looking for that kind of bottleneck around the neck here, particularly. Let me move that reference photo around a little bit here so I can see what happens on the back here. I think there's back, yeah, there is. And once again, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but it works well for what I'm doing right now. You have to be sure. I mean, like, if you like it, I mean, that's all that matters. If you like the design that is kind of portrayed on the thing? It looks like maybe the spacing is a little weird on it. But that's all that really matters is, do you like it? Unless you're trying to just make it as perfect a movie replica, because sometimes there are mistakes on the movie suits. And you have to kind of decide, do you want a perfect movie replica suit, even including its little mistakes? Or do you want to, do your own thing and kind of try to just get as close to your ideal goal as possible? So go back to that front view of the neck here. This is a good reference image for the neck. It's kind of all I've got right now. So thank you to whoever made this pattern. I think I pulled it off the RPF last year when I was working on the moving lenses. Back when Civil War came out last year around this time, I think they changed his costume. Well, I know for a fact that the costume that was originally going to be in the movie was way different than what was inevitably in the movie, and it was just totally CG. And so I think that was a big reason why there wasn't any, reference images. There were no toys. There was just really nothing. It was surprising because usually when a movie comes out, there's so much to go off of on the suit. And this one, basically, it was a matter of waiting until the DVD came out to get some of that reference image information. Okay, so once again, you got to start really, I'm just trying to, I'm basically, separating all these things as symmetrically as possible. Just trying to get nice, even differences in the webbing shape. And it's really easy when you've got two on either side because you're just splitting the difference. You're just trying to get as close to the middle as you possibly can. Okay, I think that might have been the last webbing line. That basically does the mask. Finishes the whole design. So yeah, you've got pretty much everything there. There are a couple things, like I said, I think these are too wide, too far apart, but that's something I can change. It's a really simple matter of just kind of editing that in the final pattern. Excellent. I'm really glad that worked out because I just saved a lot of time. What I might do now is kind of show you how I put the masking tape onto the mannequin head because I didn't start with that. But that saves a lot of time now because I'll just go ahead and continue pulling this off, and I basically already got the mask pattern. I can kind of teach you next step is to get it into the computer. Cool, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit this part again, score it again really fast. I think that one's already pretty good to go. I'm going to cut these web segments that I added on top, really press them down first so that they're stuck, you know, they're not going to peel up. Because that's my reference. You know, the reason why you want to have all this stuff together is because these webbing segments coming together on a seam, that's your reference for how it goes together too. You don't want to guess that kind of thing or have it get misaligned. Alright. Great. Okay, so I have that side one cut. I think I pretty much have this, oh yeah, that's right, I want to start this face one down at right about here. And I have that one already pretty much cut, but I'm just going over it again because I've added a couple of webbing segments now. Really fast too, I want to go ahead and mark the middle here because I've kind of just guessed, but these aren't perfect distances from the center, so you know that would basically be the only thing I would have to go off of if I were to use this when I rip this apart and flatten it out as my pattern. So what I do when I'm finding a center line on anything like a mask or a sculpt or anything, I just do a kind of connect the dots thing where I step back because a lot of times something will be asymmetrical and I just kind of like do little dots that look like the centermost area of whatever it is you're dealing with. You know, sometimes those dots will be off a little bit, but just whatever area, you know, moving down the line, just find the centermost aspect of it. I think I'm off a little bit. I'm just going to move the center to the middle of those webbing lines because those webbing lines should be the center, or centered. But that gives me a lot to work off of right there as far as once I'm flattening out the pattern. All right. Now what I want to do is I actually want to do the same thing on the other side of the pattern. You know, I'm going to be ripping all of this off, and I need some of those other seam lines on the other side to kind of figure out what the shape of the middle of the mask is. And this is anytime I've ever done this, the shape of the mask I'm about to get versus the finished mask that I wind up with is always really different. I've learned a lot about spandex and stuff over the years, so I might be at a point where that's not necessarily the case. But over the years, whenever I do this process and I kind of have a mask after that, the pattern changes a lot. There are just a lot of places where it's not tight enough and places where it's too tight, and so it really is just rough and it doesn't need to be perfect. It's kind of the key takeaway. I cut towards myself a little bit there, but that was once again because I'm doing it for the camera. Okay, it's probably pretty well cut. Yeah. See, just kind of it's still the tin foil that I use underneath can really pose a obstacle to cutting these patterns apart. So that's why you really have to kind of score it a couple times. Oh, that's right. I end there. I'm not going all the way up to the top like I typically do. So I'm just kind of ripping and separating last little remnants of tin foil that's kind of holding it back and on. So you can see here that it still has a very chin shape. It still is very like protruded out and bumped out. If I were making this out of like a non-stretch material or like a leather or something like that, I'd need to keep making seam lines in order to make this curved, complex shape. But because spandex stretches so much, this can all just be a flat shape. And that chin bulge we see right here, that will happen because the spandex stretches. So basically the shape is just this flat shape minus the chin, you know, minus that little bulging area out. And that kind of, you know, goes for the rest of the entire pattern. The next one I want to do here is it's difficult for you to see. I think I might go ahead and do it with Sharpie so that you can really tell. But I've got this web segment here, and basically I'm starting at this segment right here, and I'm going all the way back here, and then I'm stopping at this area right here, and I'm going up, and that's where it joins with the other side. There's not going to be a forehead seam. I'm going to try it without the forehead seam. Just try to eliminate that thing once and for all. Although I say that, and they had no forehead seam on the Raimi suit, they were able to get away with not needing that. And so the next thing here is the back piece, and that's the next line I'm about to cut. And that joins like this. And then it comes together with the side of the mask right here. And you can tell I've already cut the line, so it's pretty obvious down here. But there's also a middle seam on these back pieces too, just to get them, if you do want a zipper here, because sometimes the material isn't as stretchy as you really want it to be, especially after screen printing and stuff like that. That could be why they put that back of the mask zipper on, is because the material has to be really stretchy in order for a mask to actually be able to stretch up through that neck hole. It's just crazy how hard that aspect of the mask can be. Okay, so now you can kind of see that. Let me find one more color here. A Sharpie. Yeah, green will do. Okay, so the next area here is just this seam that goes all the way along here and down. And since this is the front mask pattern, I'll just kind of do green on this one too. Alright, so that's basically the only seams on this thing. So I'm going to continue to cut out the back middle piece. You can see, now that I've added those colors, you can kind of see where I'm going with my cuts here to separate everything. It's not quite such a guessing game. Alright, so I don't want to cut down like that. That's just a high likelihood of me kind of losing control and slipping. So, lay it down like that, have a little more control. Not much. Alright, wedge it between my body here, but make sure not to be cutting towards myself. Just going right down the middle of that tape line again. Cool. So pretty much this back mask piece is done. As long as all the cuts were solidly done and it's separated. I think I might need a little more here. Yeah, that guy's pretty much off of there and ready to become a pattern piece. So that's the back center piece. It actually looks a lot like the ASM2 back center piece, webbing and all. So now, I've got that. You can tell because of the tin foil on the inside. I just really crumpled tin foil onto the model. You've got that tin foil crumpled onto the model. And then, it has all these complex curves and everything, but the next step then is to just take it on a flat surface like this table in front of me, and you just kind of collapse it. You kind of massage it and collapse it so that the outer areas aren't like ripping apart, but the inner areas are kind of folding and collapsing in on themselves. And ultimately, because it's just tin foil and tape, you're left with a totally flat pattern piece that has shrunk. It has shriveled the same way fabric shrivels when it's flat, and created Joshua asked if we're doing the mechanical lenses in this mask. For anyone that's tuned in a little late, definitely, that's what this whole process is, why I'm starting with this, is we're starting from square one. We're starting from these reference photos of the mask that I've got, you know, posted up here behind me, and then going all the way to, you know, sewing the designing it in Photoshop, getting the pattern printed, sewing everything together. I've already done a sewing stream, but I'm going to be doing another one. And then probably sooner, you know, it's not going to necessarily be in this order. Now that we've got this mask pattern, that was kind of what was holding me back from doing this MCU moving eye tutorial. Because if you look at my old one here, it's complex. The nature of the thing is complex in that, you know, the mask has to be attached to the shell. I can't take this mask off of the shell, and the lenses are attached, you know, layered on top so that it pins everything in place really nicely. I have a few ideas for how I would make it a removable outer frame on top of the mask so that you could, you know, potentially have different suits for how the, you know, that sink in and attach. But right now, you essentially have to have this mask first before you can do the moving lenses. So if you look at what I've got going here, you can see that my frames are in place here, but I've got nothing inside here. You know, and you have to have that in order for all the mechanics and everything to move underneath. And I've actually got the chin unattached too, but I don't think I'm going to do that again because the mechanics push out a little too far. And so I had a lot of people saying that the mask looked like E.T., even though I don't think it looks like E.T. But that's why we're designing the mask right now. This is a different Spider-Man mask design I did for a fan film, but it just happens to have a lot of the same details as this Marvel mask, so I used it for the first prototype. But no, I'm really excited to get into doing, you know, the moving lenses and everything. I've got a plan for how I want to tackle it and everything, but I just want to have this, you know, this tutorial series going and everything, so that I've got, you know, a wide audience. So as I move through this tutorial series, you guys should feel free to, you know, share on like Spider-Man boards or forums, any forum where you think people might be interested in this stuff. You know, the more broader viewership I get, I'm already, you know, I'm blown away by how many of you guys watch these things and watch them afterwards too. So I definitely I like doing these a lot. But as we go through the Marvel, the MCU stuff, I think that'll be a good chance to kind of share and kind of build the viewership of the stream. And if I'm able to keep it really consistent and on Tuesdays, Thursdays, then once on the weekend, I think that'll be a good way to jump into all of that. So stay tuned. That's happening soon. So now that I've finished with that sidetrack, it's time to finish flattening out this pattern. Okay, so I've already got the back pattern piece there, and I've actually got most of the other pattern pieces cut, or seam pieces cut, but what I want to do here is I actually want to cut this seam. It's the same as this seam over here, this one that I cut right here. I want to cut that on this side too, because I want this middle piece, you know, for this flattening process. What I did to flatten out this pattern piece, I want to be able to flatten out this forehead piece like that. So I need to go ahead, and it doesn't need to be perfect, because as long as I've got a middle line and a detailed half, you know, the other half doesn't have to be as detailed. I just want it to be kind of a similar shape for the sake of flattening everything out. So just kind of let me figure out the best way to cut this so that you all can see. Let me flatten it out really fast. That'll be safer. I really never cut myself anymore on projects. As long as you just don't cut towards yourself, and you just kind of view a knife exactly as what it is. And always use really sharp knives. You might think a dull knife would be safer, but the reality is that the sharper the knife is, the safer it is. Because you don't have to force it so hard. You don't have to muscle it through your material. And when you're muscling it through the material, that's when you're more likely to slip and cut yourself. All right, so I cut a little too far there. And then you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this too, just for the sake of peeling it off the model. Once again, doesn't need to be perfect. This information doesn't really mean anything. It's just to get it off the model in a nice, like, cohesive way without ripping it off. So that's the other back half. And so now it's time to basically deglove Spider-Man's face here. We've already done the chin. That's, you know, got its chin shape to it. And now all that's basically left, since the back is off, just have to make sure that these side seams are all cut in far enough. And I can basically just pull it off at this point. Oh wait, except I've taped it. I taped the foil down a little bit. I can feel that underneath. So I'm kind of pulling that up. But because it's a lot of layers of masking tape on top of tin foil, you know, I'm not really at too big of a risk of like ripping or deforming the shape too much. Because it's, you know, it'll keep its shape. The masking tape with the tin foil on the back, you know, it has to keep that shape of whatever three-dimensional object it was on top of. All right, and so as you can see, here's the lensless or the eye hole-less shell I started with, but I don't think that's the right shape. This thing has kind of too narrow of a shape. It doesn't really have the kind of protruding eyes that Spider-Man has had in the last few movies. And so it's a nice shell, and I think I'll still scan it. I think it's the same shell from my old Amazing Spider-Man 2 shells, and a lot of people really like that shell, but it's not right for this project. And so now that we've gotten that all ripped apart and off here, we're just left with a very tinfoil tape sort of thing here that, you know, can even actually be worn as a creepy mask. I don't even know what it looks like. Yeah, so what we do here to alleviate that shape, yeah, and you can see, you know, like there's gonna be a lot of compressing that needs to be done here to make the center of this face compress enough. You know, I might still have to do that middle forehead line, because really this gets into, you know, I was saying earlier, why can't you just have a seam that goes around the side of the head? That's basically what this seam is, you know, and in order for me to flatten it out now, I just have to smash this whole thing down like this. And so that's what we do those seam lines for, to alleviate that kind of pressure. But already I can tell that this is going to be tough. I mean, it's going to be really tough for it to make that line without some kind of a forehead seam. It's particularly the forehead that's going to have to really compress a lot if I don't want to include that seam. You know, it's not the end of the world. You probably could compress it down, and then if you didn't like it and wanted to do a forehead seam, you could cut it and then compress it down a little further. You just have to be careful that you're not smashing and ruining the whole thing by compressing it down. Yeah, that'll compress a lot. I'd still love to make it work, because I just don't like that forehead seam. There's just a reason why you might not want to do that. Yeah, it's already putting a lot of pressure on it. You know what might alleviate that is if I did do what I actually typically don't like to do, although it's not as big of a deal for this mask because it's not so much the lenses sitting just magnetized on top of the lenses. But what I could do is move my my eye seam here much further down, because that gets gobbled up by the eye hole anyway, and by the lens and everything. So I'm going to flatten this out, because, you know, as I was compressing that down, I realized I was having to smash it down way too much and eliminate a lot of the details of the webbing in order to facilitate that huge spherical curve we've still got going here. So I'm going to go into the eyes here a little bit, and I think that's going to alleviate most of this stuff. It would have been nice to leave that dart not going all the way over, but At the same time, you don't want darts ending all over your pattern because darts are kind of distracting where they end, inevitably. It's hard to hide the end of a dart. Difficult to get my fingers in at this angle. Okay, so I'm just cutting towards the eye hole here because if you think about it, really, I mean, with the moving lenses, all of this will be gone. All of this inner material will be getting trimmed out. And so all that matters is how these line up and sew together. And so there will be a big difference between how those are like placed on the fabric. Just do it really quick on the other side too. All right, so as you can see, I just went really deep into the eyes there. And I think that's going to do a lot to, yeah, see? Now it's doing what patterns are supposed to do. Now it's separating into all of its more complex, cohesive parts, and you could even have these all in different parts that just sew together in the middle. But because of, you know, the sake of wanting it to look nice and clean, we can try our best here to leave it so that they don't have to be all sewn together. It's just one large piece that dart together to make a nice, clean looking mask pattern. So now is just the time for, I'm going to practice a little bit on this other half of the mask. Just flattening out each of these mask patterns. Because, once again, because this is masking tape, several layers of masking tape and tin foil, it can't stretch. It can't stretch and it can't deform outside of the shape that you built it on top of. It has to sit, it has to keep that shape essentially. Whatever shape you put it, you apply the tape in, it won't like deform away from that. And so that's why you have this nice ability to kind of smash it flat like this, is that even if it is getting smashed flat, it's still honest about its shape basically. You know, it's still keeping the information about its shape in there. All right, man. This is some key information I'm giving you guys right now. This is how you do a whole pattern essentially, just kind of making it from scratch. Because we're gonna be diving further into this, working on the rest of the MCU pattern at some point. I think I might do the moving lenses before I do a full suit of the MCU pattern, but basically the MCU pattern, I'm going to have a live stream where I'm just doing this exact same process but on top of an entire mannequin. If you don't have a mannequin, that's not the biggest problem because you can make a duct tape dummy. Duct tape dummies are pretty cheap. They're usually like, you know, 20, 30 bucks in materials, just old clothing and duct tape. And if you Google duct tape dummy on YouTube or Google, you get just I had to smash that shape in a lot right there. Sorry, just kind of getting in. You know, that was such a huge shape. I still think the spandex can do it and not need a forehead seam. That was such a huge shape. I really had to smash and gnarl the shape in there. So really, anything that happens with that is going to have to pull and stretch. So I'm going to have to keep an eye on that, and if I have troubles with that, I might just have to come back and add that forehead seam in. But otherwise, it's a lot like the Raimi pattern right now, where the Raimi pattern doesn't have a forehead seam, and that leads to just a really nice, smooth, like if you look at CG Spider-Man right here, you know, his forehead's really smooth and, you know, you don't have like a harsh line right here, and it's his face, so it has a lot of attention drawn right up to it. Yeah, that looks pretty good. It's going to be difficult to pull the information out of that, of the whereabouts of, you know, these webbing lines, because they had to really conform and stretch in a weird way to flatten out like that. But I think, yeah, I think that's enough information right there, essentially. I had to smash down the nose right there, flattening out the whole chin piece so it's more workable here. There's a slight difference in the chin shape on either side of the mask here. It looks a little a little thicker over here than it does over here. I'm not sure why I did that, but I think that's just because I was further over on this side than I was over here. So I actually might just kind of find a medium ground between those two. I think that kind of gets me the shape I need for that chin. So yeah, I basically just made my mask pattern right in front of you for you guys. It's just that, and then two of these that go on either side for the back. And then when everything comes together, now you get to see the really flat geometrical version of the mask. And this is what the spandex unstretched looks like. You know, it's totally flat, and it looks like a very, you know, rough geometric approximation of the shape of a human being, you know, as you can tell. And that's because that's exactly what you want. You want something that around the seams, you know, it doesn't have to stretch as much, but then in between the seams is likely to stretch a lot more. So great, now that we have this here, I think I might, one thing you kind of have to do, I've done a little bit of it, is sometimes when you're deforming those bold up areas, especially when you're trying to get accurate webbing lines, I can tell that sometimes the webbing is kind of shifting in the middle of those big areas that had to be pressed down. It's kind of getting crunched and moved around so it's not in the right, nice alignment. And sometimes that's something you won't find out until you do your test mask, because you're going to do a test mask with this information. You're going to draw your outline onto that spandex, you know, potentially white spandex, and then get it all cut out and everything and sewn together. And that gives you a lot of really valuable information on what needs to happen next in your design. Because a lot of this next step of just getting it into the computer and getting your pattern started is just guesswork. It's just kind of, you know, you're guessing based off of this really rough pattern you've designed, and so it's not till later on that you find out how well everything comes together. But that's just kind of the fun of it. That's the game, the patience of it all. All right, great. So this next step's pretty key, and I think you know, might be beyond a little might be sort of not beyond. Obviously, it's pretty simple, but it's not immediately obvious to people what to do here. And it's really simple. So I've got these mask pattern pieces all cut out and figured out where the lines and all of that goes, and you know, this looks like this kind of deformed a little bit. Sorry, fix that really quick before this part. My next step is I want to get this into Photoshop. You don't need to get it into Photoshop. You could take this information and trace it onto like tracing paper or onto anything really, and clean the pattern up, and then just, you know, trace it directly onto spandex with black markers or something and make a Spider-Man costume like that. That would be the easiest. You know, I've done it that way before. Just a simple this to a Spider-Man costume basically. But if you were wanting to make a dye sublimation pattern and you're wanting to be able to really clean up and refine your pattern, then you need to digitize it. You need to get it up into the computer. And some people might not know the best way to do that, or ways to do that. I've done it super simply for the longest time. I just do it, here, let me fix this up really quick, with a camera. It's basically kind of the same philosophy as photogrammetry, so you can see what I'm doing in that camera up here. Clear my workspace a little bit here, so I have the ability to take a nice clear picture. Okay, so when you're doing your super simple photogrammetry here of just taking pictures to get it into your computer, and I only say photogrammetry jokingly, you're not even putting it into like a program or anything. All you have to do, I just take my phone, you know, got my phone here, and I take it into camera mode. And one really important thing, I've got it here with this this mat right here that has the inches marked on it, but you always need a ruler or a scale, something scale, to go along with it, because that's what you're going to use to figure out the sizes of your pattern pieces and everything. So You gotta like have that just kind of in the picture, and then you know, visible to the point that you're able to see uh, all of you know, the scale detail, like the inch marks and everything. Twisted said hi. Hey, Twisted. Thanks for viewing, guys. It's fun. It's fun doing all this. Okay, so next step. I just have my camera open here, and super simple. I've just got my pattern pieces laid out flat, kind of next to each other, like they would be on a die sub file. They're kind of peeling up a little bit. If you wanted to be really precise with it, you could like tape it down and stuff. But there's enough information here, especially from directly above. So what I do, like I just said, is with your scale, everything, you know, with the the ruler there, keeping things in scale, I take my phone or my camera, any kind of camera that you can take a digital picture, and you make sure your lens is directly above the whole mass of the pattern that you're taking a photo of. So, you know, that's kind of off to the side a little bit because I've got this side piece as well, and you know, I want just kind of what's on the side here. So you center yourself, and then just go directly up. Make sure you're still centered, because you want to be as centered as possible. Any amount of being kind of off to the side, and suddenly you're changing the scale. You know, the things further away are smaller, and the things closer are larger. So you're wanting to stay perfectly above, kind of just, you know, like eyeball it and make sure you're perfectly above, and make sure the subject is perfectly centered in the picture. And it's easy as that. Just took a picture with scale and with my pattern pieces just perfectly laid out. And so the next thing I'm going to do, just for the sake of ease for us working here, I'm just going to go ahead and email that to myself really fast, so that I can put it up on my computer and we can look at it. And you know, I'm sure there are some of you guys that are watching and are like, ooh, well, I'll be able to take the amazing, or I'll be able to take the MCU pattern from all of this. Like, yeah, that's what we're doing. I'm holding your hand through making the whole thing. And you know, if you think you're kind of gonna get away with like kind of getting the pattern and making your own from it, well, I have news for you. So will everyone else. I mean, everyone's gonna have access to this information, access to these patterns. This stream will be live. And so, yeah, you're going to get to look at this pattern laid out flat with scale here in a second, and so will everyone else. So, and then eventually, once I've finished the pattern, I am going to offer it for sale on my Sell-Fi page, where I sell the patterns for, you know, the different suits I make. So if someone doesn't want to go through the process of, you know, making their own pattern and, you know, kind of piecing everything together, then they don't have to, but otherwise you can. There we go. So make sure you name it something like MCU mask, like if you're emailing it to yourself, so that you can always kind of go back and find it if you need to. All right, and so that should be on my computer in my email in a moment here. Just kind of a matter of opening it up. Yep, just got that email. We're opening that photo really fast. There we go. So boom, now we have that. Really fast, you know, just went from behind me, you know, or what I've got sitting directly in front of me, to now what I've got sitting right here, which is just the totally perfect pattern of this mask that is totally flat and, you know, ready to be put into Photoshop. So that's the next step. Let me really fast pull that image onto my desktop and make it easy to find. It's in my downloads right now, and it's named something crazy. Oh, that's much too far away. Anyway, it's on the desktop. So go into Photoshop. Photoshop time. That's exciting. I don't think I've done anything in Photoshop yet. Let me go ahead and switch to my TV screen show mode. Yeah, this is what I'm really excited to get into here. So here we are, Photoshop time. I'm way too far away from my monitor here. I'm gonna have to figure out that. Let's show stuff here. I'm gonna take a break really quick, and I'm gonna figure out what I'm gonna do with my monitor because I'm a little too far away from it. I might have to call the stream here, but I'm definitely coming back in a minute. So yeah, be right back while I figure that out. Oh, okay. There's not much I can do about getting my monitor closer, but I think I will be able to manage. I've got pretty good eyesight, so just go ahead and get it off the. Oh gosh, see, yeah, that is too far away. I can't see that. There we go. All right, so here we are in Photoshop, and we've uploaded this image that we are going to be using as our actual reference photo here. Oh yeah, good luck using Photoshop from this far away. That's not going to happen. So basically, now that I've gotten this thing into Photoshop, the next step is to adjust the scale. You can see up here around the top edges here. I need to be able to see this thing, but you also need to hear me. Oh yeah, my preview monitor is halfway across the room right now, and I need to kind of plug it in with a special extension cord when I do streams where I work on my computer like this. But anyway, essentially, since we have the mask pattern like this and the scale and everything, we really are able to start working in Photoshop and start designing this. Yeah, you know what, since I'm not able to see my monitor and I have to basically do a different setup for my monitor shows like this, I think we've done a pretty good intro here that's just solidly how you go through the process of doing this type of mask thing. Really fast, while I've still got you guys here and while I'm still doing the stream, I'll do a little bit on how I actually like a really fast little bit on when you start out, since I didn't get to show that at the beginning of the stream. So you've got tinfoil here. I get the really wide, heavy-duty tinfoil just because it comes in wider rolls, and that can be annoying because the roll will be thinner on a more standard size of tinfoil. And so basically you're just taking a sheet of this wider tinfoil and you're just kind of wrapping it up like a doggy bag here and getting it all across the mask and just getting an even surface. And what you're doing here is you're giving your masking tape or your duct tape. You don't have to use masking tape. You could use duct tape, but masking tape is really good material for this. You're giving your masking tape something to stick to and create a really, really solid skin on top of. Because the duct tape or the aluminum foil actually, you know, the aluminum foil contributes to that skin here. So what you start doing, I would actually continue covering in tin foil to the point where there wouldn't be an opening here. You'd want the whole thing covered in tin foil first. And you can use pieces of tape to secure your tin foil. So like say I just put this piece of tin foil on and I want to put one on the back now, I can tape that down and do that. It's just that when you're peeling it off at the end, you might have seen earlier that you'll have to deal with those pieces of tape as you're peeling it up because it'll be stuck to those. So basically you're just taking big pieces of masking tape like this and you're just putting it down on top of the model, on top of the tin foil, and really smoothing it out. Looks like a robot ninja or something. But you just keep taking long strands of masking tape like this and you work down. So you see I put that one up there. I'm going to kind of overlap a little bit. You know, I don't want a ton of overlap. You can have as much overlap as you want. Really, you can put as much masking tape on as you want in this process, and it will continue to build up and make that skin thicker and stronger and more durable for later in the process when you are pressing it down and stretching it down. So typically you want to start somewhere like at the top or at the back, just somewhere logical that as you're applying this tape and moving backwards, so, and this is, once again, this is just a kind of, I'm kind of actually towards the end of the stream here because I've already separated the pattern and flattened it out and everything. But I'm just kind of, I'm starting with what I had said I wanted to do towards the beginning of doing it again. Flubdub just asked what the price would be for a custom pattern. Honestly, Flubdub, I don't really do custom patterns. Maybe, you know, if you want to request it, eventually with these streams, my goal is that I'll have people requesting stuff. You know, if you want me to make a Black Panther pattern, you know, I would love to do that on the stream. I'm probably not going to do it like exclusively for you. I'll make it and then I'll sell it on my store and stuff for everyone to get. But I don't do like exclusive stuff. I'm not really interested in doing that. You know, and that's kind of the reason why I'm getting into teaching, is because if you want a custom pattern, you're learning. You know, you're learning right now this is how I would be making that custom pattern for you. It's just that if I were to take a custom order, you wouldn't get it for a long time, as anyone who has ever waited for an item from me can tell you. Anyone. I mean, like pretty much everyone who orders an item from me. I'm just not a good manufacturer of items. I just don't, I'm not consistent with making stuff. You know, it's difficult. All right, and so you see, like I just went around a complex shape like the nose. I just used a new piece, and there's a little bit still visible there. But all you have to do, even if you did kind of overlap the nose and made kind of a bumped up piece, you really just have to press it down, and you're making a really smooth kind of shape with just the tin foil and the masking tape together. Winterboy just asked if I'll have a version of the MCU without the front spider. Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but my goal with the patterns and pattern sales and stuff is to eventually sell the actual Photoshop file for my files. So, you know, if you wanted to do some kind of variation, like if you wanted to do an MCU pattern with like the symbiote colors or without the chest spider so you could put on a bigger spider or anything like that, all you'd have to do is buy that Photoshop pattern, and we're going to go into a lot of pattern making and stuff on this stream and Photoshop stuff, and so you'll have the ability to change colors and change shape of things, change the effects on the webbing. Like you You could print dye sub your suit with the kind of like 3D webbing effect already printed on there if you wanted to. But yeah, that's something I'm really excited to get into. It's kind of the customization of all of that. Okay, great. So I think that kind of gets us full circle here. If you were to just keep adding masking tape, you have complex curves and things, but as long as you're just continuing to add pieces and just press it down and make sure that the masking tape is really solidly pressed down to the tin foil. You just want it to be really well joined to the tin foil, and that's how you're getting a nice thin shape. And then that gets us back to basically the start of the stream, where now you just need your duct tape torn into your little 1/4 inch strips here. And like, let's say we're doing MCU, you can just start with, I don't know, say the middle seam. You can find out where the middle of your mask is and be able to look at it and continue to, step back and find that middle seam. That's obviously, pretty rushed. Oops. And you can do, I assume you're asking the supplies for like making your own print. Definitely a lot cheaper than having someone make it for you, because obviously if someone's making a print for you, they're charging you the price of the supplies and then their labor on top. So it's always going to be way, way, way cheaper if you're just doing it on yourself, like, or doing it for. That's just kind of a shorter one I had sitting there. But yeah, and so that's how you're adding that detail. It's just tape on tinfoil on a mannequin. Fabric on Demand, a dye sublimation company that works with kind of people who have tiny orders. You can get your file printed from them, and then Flubdub just asked, how much would it cost for all? And you can find just anyone who knows how to sew, or like your mom or friend or anyone who can sew, or if you want to learn how to sew, you can just get a sewing machine, because I guarantee a basic sewing machine costs about as much as someone's going to charge you to have the suit sewn together for just one suit. You can buy an entire sewing machine for just that price and then learn to sew, and then you'll be able to make a bunch of suits, and then potentially you can sew other people's suits together and make money. You will make money from your skill. That's why I want to kind of move the information out there. And so basically, now that I've done this tinfoil tape thing, since I only did the front, I can actually just peel it off, and you're left with a nice solid representation. I'm really excited because with the photogrammetry stuff I've shown you guys with this little tiny test shell, really, I mean, this is kind of, I could have photogrammed the face shell at this point too. When I had done my pattern design, I actually kind of forgot to do that, but I could have photogrammed the pattern while it was on top of the mask head like this, and then I would have a really nice 3D design of my pattern and my sketch and everything, the same way I did this scan. And then that is just so much awesome information for making your own custom stuff with like 3D printing and stuff. So I definitely want to get way more into that with these streams and like kind of getting back and forth. Someday I'll be more cohesive and we'll be able to actually get into Photoshop at this point and start designing the pattern and everything. Flubdub just asked if I stream every 2 days. I'm thinking, Flubdub, that my streaming schedule is Tuesday, Thursdays, and then once on one of the weekend days. So it could either be a Saturday or a Sunday. But honestly, this is a pretty relaxed kind of, for fun. A lot of this is for fun. And so you really, it's possible that occasionally I'll like miss a stream on a day. I really don't want to do that. I want to be as consistent as possible. But that's crazy. I didn't realize those were 2 Flubdubs. That's weird. Uh-oh, Flubdub. You got someone coming for your identity. Yeah, Winterboy just asked, what kind of spandex do you usually get? Spandex is actually a brand name. It's kind of like tissue. The material is actually called lycra. Spandex is just kind of like Kleenex. You know, it's just kind of a brand name that's stuck with the product, or like a zipper. And so Lycra is the material. And when you're looking for materials for dye sublimation, you want typically a 20-80 blend. And what that means is that it's 20% cotton. No, it's like, I haven't looked at this in like 2 years, but it's something like 20% spandex and then 80%. No, okay, sorry. I think what it is it's a mixture of 80% spandex and 20% polyester. And that's the ideal mixture for dye sublimation. But it's hard because for dye sublimation, a lot of times dye sublimators need the spandex to be on a roll of fabric, to be rolled up. And to buy a roll of fabric, you typically have to buy a lot of fabric. And so that's why it's typically best to go from a dealer who's kind of dealing in a lot of different, you know, doing print, you know, basically printing these files for people. And I think I'm going to pick up doing that again, since I have my printer that does red and blue printing for me, and I'm going to start doing this MCU stuff, and I want to do that on red and blue fabric. So I definitely think I'm going to start taking orders for printing in the next like month and a half, just to get people who are interested for that. But yeah, anyway, so that's basically it for this intro to designing pattern stream. I'm not sure if we'll pick back up on the next stream with this, or if we're going to go back to sewing the Amazing Spider-Man pattern. But we'll continue on with this work. It's going to turn into making this file right here that we've like, basically it's just a photo of this. We're going to turn this into our Photoshop file of you know, this kind of pattern that will be dye sublimated, and that's basically where we'll pick up with the MCU work. So once again, thank all of you guys so much for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to sit here and work on this stuff with you guys. But yeah, so thanks again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys probably on Saturday, I'm thinking, is my next stream. So cool, see you then. Thanks. Where's the mouse? Come on. There we go. All right. Thanks, guys.